Here, your mom said I need more swag that reminds me of the name of the podcast, and your dad said he was going to the basement to find magic cards.
Yes, yeah, I was gonna say that. Yeah, my dad. Like I said, I played Magic Gathering and other card games, so we have a bunch of them that are in the basement somewhere. So yeah, you could definitely find them. So, first hand of 2 from June. I think both of these are really, really interesting, both in their outcome and everything that happens in them. Do you want to just give us a little bit of context? This one is in Win 2-5.
Yeah, this is a Win 2-5 hand history. I had been pretty quiet up until this point, I guess, for those who care about that kind of thing. Like, I just have been card dead for a while. I play a pretty aggressive style in general. I would say overall, like, I play a pretty small pot style, a lot of small betting, and big over betting. So very polar player overall, very theory-based strategy, but exploitative as well. And this hand is a case where I acted somewhat exploitatively, like a little bit different than I think the theory would go. Villain was just an older gentleman, definitely recreational, who recreational and like maybe on the tight side, hard to say. It's really hard to know because I think some people like play with someone with an hour and they're like, oh, they're super tight. And it's like, I've played with people for an hour and they're like, this girl's a fucking maniac. And people played with me an hour and I was like, this girl literally doesn't play hands. So it's like, I don't really like to make too many assumptions about somebody based on playing with them for an hour, but they weren't splashy and they also weren't doing any limping, which implies that they maybe know a little bit about poker, or at least like know the very basics of like not massively losing in a cash game. So
yeah, at the moment that you see somebody limp from up front, that's where that's like one of the only actions that you could do at the poker table where I can immediately tag you and say, until you do something smart, I am going to say that you are probably not
probably fish.
Yeah, you're probably not really knowing what you're doing here.
Yeah, I will say for those listening at home, they've run sims on this. Limping from EP is very similar EV to open raising, which is a fun fact. Most people don't know that, but you only lose like a quarter of a BB with a limping strategy or something like this, like very small EV loss. But that's only from early position. Once you get to like the middle position, it's like you shouldn't be limping at all.
Very true.
Yep.
So said villain from Under the Gun opens 4x to 20, which I assume is the standard size at a 1500 cap 2-5 game. We're hecka deep. And it folds to you here in the cutoff with 7-8 suited. What does your 3-bet strategy look like here? Like, how are you constructing versus an Under the Gun open in late position?
Versus a $20 open, I'm doing a lot less flatting. Versus 15 or 10, I'm flatting like a decent amount. But as soon as it's a 4BB open, I kind of stop flatting unless I think that they're kind of a fish and like some of the hands with high implied odds that flop pot or cold, like pairs and stuff, you can start flatting. Maybe some bigger suited connectors like Queen Jack or whatever. But I think for the most part, against like a $20 open, you should play like 3-bet or fold in the cutoff. Though I don't really hate having a flatting strategy in the cutoff versus the size. I don't think it matters that much. It kind of just depends on how you perceive your opponent. For me though, I like to be aggressive. I like taking control of the pot when I have playable hands. I don't 3-bet this hand every time. It's probably like I'll 3-bet it like a quarter of the time and fold it like 75% of the time in this configuration. But I think I think playing this hand every time is a big mistake from a frequency perspective and also a construction perspective. So I would probably be 3-betting this hand like a quarter of the time, like I said.
Yeah.
I do some randomization, but like for the most part, I'm just like, I've folded like a bunch of suited connectors in the last like 5 days. I'm just going to 3-bet it this time.
I'm always so interested.
Background. I hate to roll over you, Bryce, here, but as someone who comes from that background, how do you randomize out of curiosity? Because like the only randomization that I've been able to work into my game in terms of like partials and like pre-flop is like, I'll be like, oh, okay, in this spot with reds, I'm going to raise, and with blacks, I'm going to fold. Like, the colors of my cards. So I'm interested, like, how do you randomize?
As part of an exploitative pre-flop strategy, I don't think you have to randomize at all. In fact, I think it might even be like a little overkill to do any randomization. But I just like to have a good sense of how my frequencies are, and so it's like more of a mental picture for me, so I understand my own strategy than it is because I think that the EV is way better to randomize or something like that. Like I just think that it's like I'd like to be able to have 8-7 on some boards and in some situations. I also think people overfold to aggression in big pots when they don't have the stones, and I think in general, like just having a lot of different hands in an aggressive strategy is good for you. Like there's a lot of ways it can be good.
Bryce, I rolled over you. Did you want to say something?
No, that's basically what I wanted. I just wanted to talk
Cool.
about. I think it's interesting how some people, like whether it's looking at a clock or looking at or what color someone's like so many different randomization techniques. So I was basically going to ask the same question.
Cool, good. Yeah.
I just use my chip. I'll use a chip if I really want to randomize it, but that's pretty rare. I'm just like, I don't think I've done this in a while. I'll 3-bet.
I'm the same.
No, I feel that. No, that's usually my thought process too.
Which is like not random, by the way, to be clear. But it's like it's like I'm not an idiot. Like I understand it's like kind of emotional, but like I also am okay with not being a robot. Like I'm okay with just kind of like I'm going to 3-bet this time. You know?
Yeah. That's good.
Give yourself
from a Tayo background. We were like a little concerned that you were going to be like, well, I do the math in my head and I have a random number generator in my brain and I do one.
I just felt it. I just felt like I wanted to light some money on fire.
I felt a 78 in my head.
I don't know the results of this hand, so no spoilers.
Okay, so we put in the 3-bet here to 60, folds back to under the gun and he calls. Great. So, I mean, a lot of spots that we go over in live are not heads up. I think that heads up is where things get particularly interesting because we can get a little more loosey-goosey. But we get a really good flop for our hand and range with Queen Jack 5. I guess it's kind of a neutral-ish board because it's an under the gun open, but he flatted our 3-bet. So we shouldn't really have queens and jacks, and we should. And he puts in the check to you in flow. I think makes a lot of sense. Are you just c-betting one size on this board? Are you c-betting multiple sizes? Does it depend on exactly what you possess?
It doesn't depend on my hand usually. Usually I just think of two factors when I settle on a size. I think first of all, what's like the range I'm actually against. In this situation, I think my opponent's range is basically just like pairs, ace, king, and jacks. So it's like it's one of those things where against like that range, we're kind of not going to get an auto fold from many hands with 1-bet. So this is a 2-street plan. Like this board, we're not auto folding out anything with 1-bet. Like I think 10s are going to call, 9s are going to call. If they have 8s and 7s, are going to call. Maybe 6s will start folding. 4s
ace
and
king
below
might float for a small size.
Yeah, ace king of hearts is definitely in the mix. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not expecting by putting out a small bet that I'm getting tons of auto folds. I am going to get some. Like I am going to get like some random garbage that like if they have small suited connectors or under pairs or some random ace high, like I think like ace 10 of clubs might just fold to a bet. Like it might just be done with the hand out of position, like not worth playing, right? So
that's great.
Yep. So there's like just lots of things that can happen. So I just start with a small bet here, third pot. I think the solver is probably going to go a little bigger than this deep. I think it's probably going to be a little over half pot, but I think people in general are pretty price insensitive with their hand. Whether I bet 40 or 60 here or 70, I think all the same hands are going to call this deep. Just your average live opponent, I think, is going to be pretty inflexible. So I just do a small bet because I think it's going to accomplish everything that a bigger bet would accomplish.
That's the part I've always struggled with and that Bryce has always beat me up over is like sizing on like flops and turns in live. And especially when you're, several hundred big blinds deep that you can make it a little bit bigger in this spot. Just so that you're building a pot up more. But I get exactly where you're going with the size. I think I would probably do something similar. Also, having the 5 out there is great because now like we could turn a 6 and have an open ender, 9 and have a gut shot, 4 and have a gut shot, 4 and have a gut shot. So, I mean, it's
9 is double gutted, which is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that. You're right.
Yeah.
So we bet 40.
Just what happens.
According, it's going just like we planned. Villain calls the 40. And we get a great turn. Now we're double gutted with our flush draw. We have just a butt ton of outs here. So villain checks. This is really interesting because we're hecka deep. I've heard a lot of people advocate for like big sizing here, like a over bet, like something like 250, 300, something like that to set up a really big river bet. Because I guess your hand is really disguised, and like if you do make one of your straights, like that's going to be such a sick money card on the river.
Mhm.
So interested, like how do you think about betting here in terms of size?
Only big bets for sure. Big bet or check. And in general, like when you're again, this is gonna be like an exploitative thing. When I'm bluffing, I'm gonna bet like pot, and when I'm betting for value, I'm gonna overbet. That's like kind of versus recreational players. If I perceive you to be someone who's good, I'm not going to be doing this, so don't count on it if you play a hand with me. But against a recreational player who I think is inelastic, like a recreational player who's going to call pot is also going to call overbet in general. Like you're not going to get more folds with an overbet than you are betting pot. They're just going to be like, I have a hand I'm going to call a big bet with, so I call. Like
yeah,
how many
probably
times
not
have you
even
seen
counting
like
the pot either.
yeah. Like how many times have you seen this? Like you bet and then they already slide their chips out and they're like, how much is it? And they're cutting out the bet. Like they don't care how much it is. Like they're just like, I'm calling a big bet with my hand. So, you know, exploitatively, you can save some money when you're bluffing by betting pot rather than overbetting in a spot where you normally overbet. I think overbets.
So like with queens here, you would go with like 250, but I mean, in this spot, you go with 210. So like with like queens or jacks or something like that, would you go even bigger?
With jacks, I'm betting like 400, like 450, like some like very, very large size.
Yeah. You need so much protection.
Yeah. It's not even the protection. I just want them to call. Like I just I just want to win it all. Like I'm very greedy against recreational players. Like I just bet really, really big. So it's like with value. So like if I have queen jack, ace jack, a straight, like any hand like that here that's like I think I can get called by worse, I'm just gonna bet quite large. And like that, to be clear, that does lead to situations where you get mega owned. But that's okay. You just want to win the most when you have a hand that can win a lot of money. So there's some like really funny hands where I like jam top pair, top kicker, and then they like tank call top and bottom, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, because like once in a blue moon, this guy can show up here with king 10.
Oh, for sure.
Like that's not going to be an infrequent thing that this guy just turns the stones.
Yeah. Now here's another thing to consider.
Yeah, and so
very, very, very important. He does call, but I want to be clear. I don't think most recreational players call strong hands here. I think they raise all of them.
So you think that he would put in some form of raise with king 10, trying to set up a smaller SPR for the river? I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, just because it's such a big sizing. I think that it stops a lot of recreationals cold. Whereas like a 2/3 sizing, he might attack it. But when you go like pot and bigger, I feel like it really decreases how often, even with their nutted hands, that they start to raise.
The Rex I know are flatting nines to the sizing. They're like, oh my gosh, I just bet the pot. They must have king 10 exactly. Like that's how like scared money.
That's interesting. Yeah.
That's interesting. Like, I think they could just call with nines.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think they're just calling with jacks though.
Okay. They shouldn't be, obviously, but
yeah. Here's the thing though. It's like they might just call. There's like a few ways this goes. They raise because they're scared. This is very common, right? They don't want to get sucked out on, so they raise. Really common. And people are the greediest on the turn, in my experience. Versus like, they're out of position. They want to be able to get the money in, which is good, and they don't want you to check back on the river, which is sensible. So they're either going to call this big bet and donk river, or they're going to raise with their strongest hands. Yeah. Because they just want the money in, and that's the only way to do it. And because nobody bluffs, as we talked about earlier, you kind of just get to way overfold to any like turn raises and stuff from the out of position player. That's kind of how I play this spot in general. Like any of these turn spots where I'm betting really big, is my expectation when I get called is they have like ace queen a lot.
Yeah.
That's essentially, I've put them on ace queen, maybe queen jack, although I think queen jack will do some raising. Like if this guy's got to imagine I have like aces or kings, because that's just kind of what goes through people's minds, and they're going to want to raise those hands. So, you know, or I think they could just call with queen jack. They could just call with queens too. So it's like they have a little bit of like strong value in there, but I do think that their range is mostly just like a really strong queen X hand or a spade draw. They could just have ace king of spades. Yeah.
So we roll to the river, and it is the jack of diamonds.
Yep.
I mean, interesting card, middle or second pair pairs.
Yep.
Villain checks to us.
Yeah. Well, Mama didn't raise a quitter.
Yeah, it's kind of like if we want to have bluff that is like a total airball here, like 7-8 is the one. Like these are the two cards to be doing it with.
I disagree. I actually think that this is a check back in theory for sure. But I think it's for sure. It's like not a great bluff.
Oh, because they called the pot size turn bet?
No, we just don't interact with their calling range at all. So the reasons to bet are if they have ace king and we check and lose, it's a bummer. Like it's like we have fucked up. Like that's the bad part about checking. The problem is that the other Broadway hand that they would have, like all the Broadway hands that they have here, either make a straight, are ace high, or are ace queen or king queen.
Yeah, they have a pair. That's the problem.
So my main thinking is in this point in the hand, I have 8 high. I don't love having spades here, although the only spades, I think in theory, the spades you want to bluff with are actually like ace king. Like that, you'd much rather have ace king here actually to try and get a pair to fold, just because you're blocking the straight. So, like in general, like our hand actually has like kind of shit properties for bluffing, just because we don't really interact with anything.
The more you say, the less I like what I say.
We don't have a 10. Like if we had like,
okay, right?
Yeah, well, we don't have a 10. Like there's just like a lot of things going on here that make our hand not great to bluff. Like if we had 10-9 of spades, that's a much better hand to bluff with by like miles. It's not even close. So, in general, I know already in the spot that it's not a bluff in theory, but I kind of just feel like my opponent has ace queen or king queen, and I think that they're just going to fold if I bet pot. And that's what I went with.
I'm assuming we get called by exactly that.
No, we don't get called by that. They actually tanked for like 2.5 minutes, which was interesting. I was like, oh, they probably do have ace queen, and they're probably going to fold. They're like tanking for like a really long time. And then they did call, and they had queen jack in this.
Which is unbelievable. Which is just so hilarious. Like this guy literally had to put you on the singular remaining combo of 2 queens.
He tanked forever to call.
That's I've never seen that.
I'm playing this hand identically with aces and kings.
That would have tilted me. Oh my gosh, I would have said something.
I mean, like,
I didn't. I said he called, and then I immediately showed my hand because I always just show. And he like looks and looks and looks and looks, and then shows his boat, so it gets like a little soul roll in addition to the 2.5 minute tank. And then someone was like, "How could you not raise there, buddy?" And he's just like, "Oh, how am I supposed to get called by 8 high?" And then I was like, "Whatever, man." Like nice hand.
Wow.
Yeah. So pretty weird spot. I think it's a check back. The book says it's a check back. I'm pretty sure I could check it. I don't think I actually checked, but I could check it. But, I think in general in live poker, when people don't really love playing big pots with one pair of hands, and when they get to the river and you put in the last bet, they tend to just believe you. And this is true of regs. It's true of recreationals. It's kind of just true of everybody. And I didn't really put my opponent on being like a huge station, but apparently they were just a nit. Which is like pretty sick, actually. Like I actually think I like my play even better, given that my opponent's a nit. Just because when they do have king queen or ace queen, they're always
they're snap mucking. I was just thinking, I'm like, if this river is literally any other card other than a jack, like he probably is just snap folding to this bet with top 2.
Yep,
like that's crazy pants. This guy's
ace jack, king jack, 10 jack, all the jack X all fold on the turn. So they just don't have a jack on the river, like ever, except this exact jack. So it's like, I really like my play exploitatively, despite the fact that I got the wrong outcome, just given that my opponent tank called the second nuts. But, that hand is cool.
Yeah, that is a cool hand. So we got one more from you.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's 5-10 at the Bellagio. So in terms of structures between like 2-5 and 5-10, how do you decide when you're playing that? So I know like you recently did like a month where you took all 5-10, something like that. Is it something where you go back and forth, or like the game at the win's better at the 2-5 1500, so you're there instead of the 5-10 1500 at Bellagio?
So the difference, I think buy-in is often like a little bit better of a way to think of bankroll management than stake. just because of how the way live games work. Like online, it's like you're always playing 100 bigs, so they're pretty mapped up. But like playing a 1,500 buy-in game at the Win versus like buying in for 1,000 or 1,500 at the Bellagio 510, they're pretty similar. You're going to have a higher standard deviation in the 510 game, but for the most part, your bankroll is going to like handle it pretty similarly, I would say. Assuming you're not in like a massive 510 where there's straddling and people are like 3K deep and you like double up and stuff like that, then you should not be playing that game if 1,500 is your bankroll cap. So it's like, but you know, in general, I'll play the Bellagio 510 occasionally. That's the biggest I'll play for the most part. But yeah, I mean, as far as game selection goes, I kind of just check the lists. If there's more games somewhere, I'll go where there's more games, because then it's just kind of like, if you have a bad game, you can table change or whatever.
Yeah.
Then I'd rather not go to a different casino, which I will do, of course. Sometimes I go to the RA to play 2-5. I try 3 games, they're all dog shit, and then I go to the Win. It just is what it is, you know. So it's like you can't like. It's not one of those things where it's like I'm stuck in my ways or anything. But in general, my favorite place to play is the Win. I just happened to be at the Bellagio for whatever reason this night, mixing it up.
Yeah, I feel that's so good. A lot of people who are new to poker just don't realize that. Like if the room that you're in sucks and there's one that's somewhere else, like just go. Like we have the ability to see what the list looks like, and if it's like less than 4 or 5 people, it's a 20-minute drive. Just get in the goddamn car. Like, don't slog your way through 7 OMCs who are going to fall asleep and play queens plus only. Like, get in the car and go.
Yeah, there's 2 things that are happening. I think this is like a brief aside on game selection. If you're in a game where there's a lot of 3-betting, I would get out of that game immediately. People don't realize this. They think that means it's like an action game. It doesn't. It means that the people are thinking good players who understand that their 3-bet ranges should be pretty wide in a lot of spots, and they're not uncomfortable with playing big pots with marginal hands. That might sound like, oh, this is a really good game, but in reality, that just means it's a really hard game, because you're going to have high standard deviation against opponents who are willing to put pressure on you, which is not great for live hourly. What you want to be in are games where you're opening to like 20 in a 2-5 game and getting like 3 callers.
Yep.
And people aren't really 3-betting that much. Like, those are ideal live games. So yeah, just to be clear. And also I'll say that I definitely play with recreational players who I think are losing in a lot of lineups, but they have good game selection because they care about being in games with like some action, and they're probably winners as a result.
Yeah, it's a great way to turn it around for you.
Yeah. So game selection is important. TLDR.
Yeah. So here we go. We've got a straddle on here. So now up to 5, 10, 20. So we're actually pretty damn short here. You know, we're what, 75 big blinds effective.
Yep.
It folds here to the cutoff, who opens to 50. So I think is interesting. Even when like this short, I see a lot of recreationals still just open to 3x, like because they'll open to 4x, like at a standard 2-5 or like at a standard 5-10, and then at this situation they'll just open to 60. So I don't know if that really makes that big of a difference. I mean, you guys are short enough, so I think this is the right size to take with no ante in there. So like there's nothing to really fight over. So I think this is right, but I just think it's interesting that he actually only opens to 50.
Yeah, I think people don't really understand this either. I feel like I'm just talking trash. I'm not trying to. The straddle means you should play a lot tighter, unfortunately. I think people think straddle is like an action thing. It's an action killer. The more good players you are in the game, the more the straddle is going to kill the action in general.
Why the good players ask for the straddle?
Yeah, because bad players react very negatively to the straddle.
Yeah.
React in a minus EV way to the straddle, whereas good players get tighter in general. So regardless, this guy's like a recreational player. I've played with him a couple times. Not a professional.
Gotcha. So we're here with King Queen of Diamonds in the big blind. There is still the straddler behind us. I think that's really important. If that straddler wasn't there and this were just like a standard open and a button flat, are you immediately squeezing here with King Queen of Diamonds, or are you ever flatting?
It's a mandatory squeeze.
I'm with you.
But the important thing here is that when there is a caller, people have this idea that you should be calling more in the big blind when there are more callers. That's wrong. You should be folding more and 3-betting more because you have bigger reverse implied odds with all your hands. So the main thing is that, like, if you look like a pre-flop sim where it's like it goes like MP open, cutoff call, button call, and then it folds to the big blind, they actually have no flats a lot of the time. They just fold everything. They 3-bet it. Because it's like, you're going to flat queen jack off for a blind and like lose to like a better jack or queen? Like, sounds terrible, right? So it's like, it's just one of those things where like, you have massive reverse implied odds playing such a big pot multi-way. So it's like better to just squeeze and try and get heads up where you can actually win the pot.
Really good advice.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, we're definitely squeezing here. I think if I had king queen offsuit, I would fold or squeeze, like a mix. But the suited one, you just gotta squeeze it up.
Gotta do it.
I'm interested in the sizing.
240. I love it. I thought it was gonna be either 240 or 250, and I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately the size I kind of have to use to deny equity effectively. I think 200 is fine too, for what it's worth, just because we're shallow. Yeah, I think a tournament player would probably go a little smaller, but
yeah, totally.
I like the sizing.
Yes.
So 240s make sense, and then the original razor calls, and then the button folds,
which is great. Heads up again,
yeah.
Out of position this time, but with the betting lead.
Yeah,
we'll get an interesting flop. 10-6-5. Not the worst thing in the world for us. We've got plenty of backdoor nonsense going on. Yeah. This is something where, I mean, if we're structuring C bets, any diamond's going to be a good barrel card for us. Any face card's going to be a good barrel card for us. I think this is a great place to start a bet that's going to continue on the majority of turn cards.
Yeah, this is a range bet for sure. The important thing about it is if it was the button, it's kind of interesting. It depends on who called the squeeze. Whenever the overcaller calls the squeeze, you actually end up just tripling off against them, like pretty much always.
That range is so collapsed.
Yeah, they kind of just never have a strong hand, or they flop the set, and you're gonna get crushed.
Yeah, it's over.
But they usually, like recreational players who overcall squeezes, tend to raise in those spots. Because they just kind of can't keep it in their pants, and they're just like, I have a set, I raise, and then you just get so it's like, but in general, it's like when the original raiser calls in the cutoff, so we're playing like small blind versus cutoff formation, we're both going to have okay board coverage here. I'm going to have ace 10, some 10-9, some jack 10, hands like this. So it's like, and I'm not going to have sixes or fives, although they shouldn't really have a lot of sixes and fives. They should probably mix calling those hands, but this shallow, they might actually just be folding all that stuff if they're playing correct. So, but people love to set mine, so I usually give people full combos of the pairs, regardless, in the strategy.
I'm with you. Yeah. I like the sizing, 150 into 555. I think anything between 150 and 200 is probably acceptable on this board. And especially being on the smaller side, considering we are shallow, I like the idea of going bigger pre-flop to give yourself the ability to bet this small sizing on the flop and give yourself the right odds to start hitting cards that you like on the turn. Because I feel like the cutoff opener isn't really going to be attacking small C-bets on this board enough.
I agree.
Like, probably they should, right? Because you have king, queen of diamonds here. You're going to have a lot of like hands that you're going to be double barreling with that, like, if he just raises immediately, he can get you off of. So if he's thinking, he might bluff with worse, but like most players are just going to be calling this bet with stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of hands that can call this bet, but there's also a lot of auto folds. So it's just like, again,
there's some
like
ace
all the
high.
same hands.
Anytime we're gonna get ace high to fold, like, and you're just like immediately printing money from doing so, like it's a good bet.
If they have like ace jack of hearts or something, they're probably just gonna fold.
Yeah, they're just gonna
so it's like, even like ace queen off, they might have peeled with, and they're probably gonna fold that hand. So it's like, in general, I find people tend to just kind of auto fold a lot of stuff here. And then when I do get called, it's like kind of the same situations before. I picked these two hands because they're similar in a lot of ways. Like a lot of the same principles are applying to both hands.
Yeah.
Jack of diamonds.
Turn card comes. It's the deuce of spades.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of an interesting card because, like, I was talking about all the different things that we could do in terms of constructing. But then there's also the conversation of like, what if the disconnected low card comes? Mm-hmm. And I think there is, I don't know, like, is there some case for betting this card, even though, like, just because it's such a dud of a card and it changes nothing? Are there hands that he has that calls flop that are just going to fold this dud of a turn because he thinks that you're just overpair heavy?
There are, but what's more important is our holistic strategy, and we just can't bet this hand on this card because we have hands to bet on this card, and we can't just blast it every time we get it. Like,
that's totally fair.
So it's just sort of like we have the same exact hand in spades that would just bet here again.
Yeah.
And then shove river if we miss. So it's like, in general, there's just like kind of no reason. Like at this point, we're done with the hand. If we check and they bet, the hand's over. Like we're just not putting any more money in the pot. That's not how this hand goes. But the important thing is, hand selection is really important. You want to be bluffing with hands that have equity, so you have like a reasonable distribution of high value hands across all the runouts. And we just don't need to bluff with this hand. Like we just have hands to bluff with ultimately. Like, and then when we if we want to check and protect our range here to have like a double check call, we can just have like ace 10 in that range.
Yeah.
So it's like
a good top pair.
Yeah. So we don't really have to like bloat the pot with like our one pair hands. Like I would probably do a lot of checking with aces and ace 10, and then a lot of betting with jacks through queens, as well as top set and like, hands like that. So it's like this hand is just like, and then our bluffs are like all the Broadway combos of spades we get to just bluff with. So we don't have to bluff with this hand. It's like we'd be bluffing a lot if we were bluffing with this hand. So we don't.
That makes a lot of sense. I really like that explanation. And I'd like to say turn goes check, check. And we get the ace of diamonds river.
I wish this card was on the turn.
Yeah, right. Really.
So now the question is, do we get to bluff, and what hands do we bluff with? I think this hand's a great hand to bluff with. We unblock backdoor spades. So backdoor spade draws that like floated, flop, and missed. We get to bluff. All of our spade draws actually bet the turn, really. So we're not going to have missed spades here very often when we do decide to bluff. We're actually going to, our range is mostly like this exact hand and ace high that rivered top pair. That's basically our range at this point when we do decide to bet. So this is, to my mind, one of our best bluffs in this situation in the bet check bet line out of position.
Which is so good to think about, because so many people, like you were talking about when they're done with the hand on the turn, and then they don't see the opportunity when the ace of diamonds comes here on the river to turn this hand into a bluff, because this is
very good
one of the best hands to do it with.
I also block ace queen and ace king that floated flop if they did float the small size. So it's like my hand has a lot of good properties to bluff with, mostly that we lose a showdown always when we check, and we block good hands, and this ace is a really good card for us in this line of the game tree. So
we opt to put in what is it, 2/3, a little more than 2/3, no, really like 2/3, 3/4 pot size,
three-quarter pot bet, which is like, if I don't really think I have a lot of block bets on this card. Like I think we're just checking or betting really big. The block bets are going to be like, I don't know, like probably when we river, like if we had aces here, maybe you'd want to put in like a quarter pot bet.
Yeah. Try to get a call from a 10.
Yeah, or something like that. But like really we're trying to get a 10 to fold here. Or trying to get like 9s or 7s or 8s to fold. Like those are the big targets that we're trying to get to fold here. We get snapped off though.
Nice. Oh man.
I think it's totally fine. I like it.
Villain's got ace 3 of spades.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess it makes some sense. The turn call, especially turning backdoor spades and gutter.
Yeah. So
a ton of equity. Kind of interesting.
It's kind of crazy how fast he called. I was just like, wow. Like I said 650 and then it was like boom. And I'm like, cool. All right, you got me.
There goes that paycheck.
See you later. See you 650. Yeah, I wanted to share these two hands because I think they're pretty interesting hands that I think in high, like it's easy to feel really bad about the outcome of a hand. But I think as I talked about the hands, like now looking back on them, I think I would have played them the same way and they seem very well reasoned to me. And I think we're going to get a good outcome here most of the time in these lines. It's just like they're interesting hands in that like they're just like these hands actually happened in the same week where I was in a kind of similar 3-bet pot situation, playing a very big pot with a marginal hand. And both times I had a reasonable bluff candidate and both times I bluffed and got called. So it's like kind of interesting. They're cool hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally agree.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, sharing both your insight in the hands as well as just your commentary on everything. I thought you were very articulate and just absolutely loved having you on and can't wait to play with you soon. Ryan, do you have any closing words?
No, I could agree. I literally couldn't echo. I couldn't have said what Bryce said any better, and that's why I'm struggling to say any words. So really, thank you so much. This was a pleasure, really.
Of course.
Thank you. Take care, Joe.
Cool.
Will do.